Okay, so I'm actually starting out with the project that I zipped up, which is the solution to assignment one. And so what I'm going to do here is at this point we don't have our paging as work, being able to go to the different users based on what their last name starts with, and that works. We've got this toggling going back and forth for the sorting. But none of these links work. So, you click on edit, and you're going to find the resource doesn't exist. And if you look, one of the things that happens here is that these links get put in, and I guess when it puts the scaffolding in, it realizes that you have a property that's called ID, and it assumes that this is going to be what would be the primary key for each of these contacts, right? Basically, again, if you don't have a lot of database experience, it would be the ID that would identify each of these contacts. You go to details, right, and this doesn't work either. And you go to delete, and that doesn't work either. So that's the functionality that we're going to go ahead and create. We'll start out by creating the detail. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put a real simple method here in my ContactBus. So right now the only method that I have in ContactBus is getContacts. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put in public contact, getContact, pass in an ID, and just really simply return data where c.id equals the ID that was passed in, singular default. Okay, so now this is just going to make my life a little bit easier when I do the detail page. I can build this, and now all I need to do is go back into my contact controller, which doesn't have too much going on in it. I mean, it's got the index, which is not trivial, but this is actually pretty easy. What I need to do is put a public method. It's going to return an action result. Call it details. I'm going to pass in an ID because that's what's being passed to it currently. I don't have that controller, but that's what that link does. And I'm just going to say model. Again, I've got this ContactBus property, which just returns an instance of, it's set in the controller. It's being populated with an instance of ContactBus up here. And I'm simply going to say getContact, put in the ID, return view, model. Okay? And if I build this, right, the error that I'm going to get is I'm not going to have my view, right? So we've seen this a couple of times. I click on details. It doesn't get that the resource isn't found because it finds the controller. It just doesn't find the view. So these are things that you learn how to troubleshoot pretty quickly. And now I'm going to go into details, say add view. This is going to be a contact, and I'm just going to use the scaffold that's here. I don't need these script libraries. If I click on add, it puts a bunch of HTML in here, but really it's just really a field set with labels and values. Display for this would be the equivalent as doing either display for, or you could probably do HTML. I mean, frankly, you could probably just output this as and you'd probably get the same results. I don't know if it ends up putting things in a span tag. We could look and see what ends up getting generated, but it's sort of smart enough to know that if this property is a string, it's just going to output a string. And if this property, and you could do things that you could specify. Hey, look, for different types of properties, I'm going to have a different type of display. But that's not something that we're going to be doing right now. And I've got these action links that take us back to. That allow us to go to edit and also back to list. I'm going to leave these as is at the moment. I don't think we're really going to use them all that much. And now if I go back here and I reload this, I go here and I can go back to list. Now, I mean, if we got more complicated, and we're not going to do it right now, but you could have something in you could change your model so that you could pass in. Well, actually, there is a little bit of an easier way to do this. forgot about this. When we go back to list, very simply, if we want to see where we were to some degree, we could say new prefix equals model dot prefix, right? Because our model is the contact has a prefix. I don't even have to rebuild here. I can go up here and just reload this page, and this should take me back to, it's going to take me back to A. That doesn't prove much because A is the default, but if I was to go to details here, right, it would take me back from where I came. So let's do a few other things here. One of the things that I want to do is I want to be able to edit. I want to be able to create. I want to be able to delete. Let's start with the delete first, because that's kind of an interesting one to work with. And again, right now our BUS class is just dealing with data that we're caching. What we'll end up doing soon enough is storing this data in a database where it'll make a little bit more sense. But what we could do here is we could say public void delete. And what I'm going to pass into this is I'm going to pass in a contact. And the reason being is that you might want to know, although we could just pass the IDs, this class might do some logging to say what was the name of the contact that got deleted, or if there was related information. And what we could do here is just say, the contact is going to be this get contact ID. And the reason I'm doing that is that what I really need to do is I need to delete. It's not just any contact. It's got to be a contact that's part of this list that's in the cache. So again, this is not stuff that you run into as much when you're dealing with a database. But this is grabbing something from this data object, which is in my cache, and now I can tell my data object to remove contact. Okay? Now, this is an interesting thing too, because this is actually a situation where you have a controller that's not going to have a view associated with it. So this is now in my BUS class. This is my logic layer. If I had things like logging for deleting, this is where I would put them. I wouldn't put those in the controller. And now I could create another action result. Delete. And this is just being passed in an ID. So what I'm going to do, although, the thing that's kind of interesting about that is that if it's being passed an ID, there's nothing that prevents you from doing this, right? I mean, pretty much just do model binding, right? If there's an ID property, then this is going to end up getting set. And here you could just say contact BUS delete contact, right? It's going to use the ID. It's going to get the one from that collection, and it's going to end up deleting it. And here we do a return redirect to action, okay? And we're going to go back to the index, but we'll also pass back our prefix. So in essence, you go into the page that you ended up coming from. Now this is a little bit trickier, right? Now I'm thinking about this now. What I don't have here, if I do this model binding, is I don't have the prefix that I need, right? Because if this is a GET request, this is not going to get passed back. So what I could do here, just to fix that, and I'm going to want to do it up here, I'm going to create a variable, deleted item equals contact BUS, get contact, contact.id. And at this point, now I'll have the property that I need, and I could say redirect to action prefix equals deleted item dot prefix. Again, just want to give the user a little bit of better experience so they see that the item that they went to delete got deleted. Eventually, we'll put some messaging on the page that gives a little bit more information. We're going to build this, and I'm going to go here and test this out. So at this point, I could go here to H. I could do delete, and I can see that these guys are going away, right? Now this also shows us something else, right? We don't, once we end up getting rid of all the contacts for a given letter, that link shows up. We weren't able to see that before. Again, when we rebuild, all this stuff will come out because come back and it'll be randomly generated again. But that also shows that our navigation is working. So at this point, we've got the delete working. Let's actually just set up a couple of methods for creating and for editing. Let's do create. Create's fairly easy to do. And again, I'm going to go through this with the scaffolding. In the next video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do validation, which we looked at already, but again, just to do it in a little bit more detail. And we'll end up doing validation, and we'll also end up doing a partial view where we end up sharing some functionality between the edit and between the create and the insert form. Excuse me, the create and the edit form. So what I'm going to do up here, or down here, I should say, right? Let me actually, I'm going to go back to my contact BUS. I have delete. Let me do a create. And for the create, I'm actually going to pass back an ID because usually the IDs are going to be auto-generated by the database, and so very often you'll want to pass that information back because the user might want to do something with it. And what I'm going to do here when I go to create, I'm going to say contact.id, and I'm going to use my link again, and I'm going to say, hey, data, give me the max. Max of what? Okay. Each item is a contact. Give me the max ID. Add one to it. Right. Those are going to be unique keys. And then I'm going to say data dot add this contact. Okay. And it basically will add this to the collection that's being stored in the cache. Okay. And then I'm just going to return contact.id. Again, if this was a database, this would be an auto-generated value, most likely. It would definitely for an integer. And then I might want to return that so the user could do something with it, maybe go back to a detail page with that ID. So what we could do here is we could actually put in our create. Again, I'm following the convention with the, how the links name these things, because the scaffolding uses delete, create, and edit. So we'll put in create. Now, so this is going to be one of these where we're going to have a get and a post. Okay. When we create, we're not passing it in any ID, and we're simply going to return a view. And I'm just going to go and create a empty contact. And I'm going to add this view. This is going to be contact. And I'm going to say this is create. I don't need these script libraries. And if I go here, this is going to do a couple things. It's going to wrap this thing in a form. The action is going to be basically the same URL that you ended up going to. There's some validation messages. Again, there's editor4, but you could replace this with a text box or a text area. It's smart enough to know that this is a string. This is going to be a text area. This is the kind of thing where you could set up specific editors where if you were editing a date, it automatically might show up a calendar, or if you were entering a number, you could use one of the HTML5 controls that lets you, put a number in or do a slider or something like that. But once I do this, I'm going to be able to go back here, and when I click on Create New, it's going to end up going to this page, and it's smart enough not to put the ID there and that sort of thing. And what I'm going to do here is when I go to Create, I'm going to also want to, if I clicked on this Submit button, I'd get an error message because there's no create that has a post attribute. No create action, to be more specific. So I'm going to create that, and I'm going to create that create. So I'm going to go down here and paste this in. And I'm going to now do my model binding, because now I've got a form that's coming back. And it's a pretty easy thing to deal with here. Now, I'm not going to worry about my validation. I'm going to do that in the next video that I post. But all I'm going to do here is say contact BUS create C. Okay, and then I'm going to do return redirect to action. So again, I'm going to go back to the list, and I'm just going to say new prefix equals C dot prefix. And I'm just going to also make sure that I'm ascending. So I'm going to say ascending is true. In an ideal world, maybe you would find out what the, how they were sorting before, and you would pass that value here and pass it back. In which case, we would have to have a view model that was more than just a contact, right? We could have a create view model that might have some additional information. I mean, for instance, maybe if we were, if a contact had, some other relationship in a database, like a list of locations or something like that, or preferences. We might have a drop-down list. In that case, our view model would get, would have to be a little bit more complicated. So let's build this. That's going to be a post. And what this should do is that, now here we are on create. And let's go over here. And now if I go here and I say, insert a new one, I'm on G. And I could say A, B. Now again, I'm not doing any validation here. I'm going to save that for the next one. But this should take me to the B page. Let's see, list. I'm sorry, I don't know why I went back to list. That was my mistake. I'm not going back to list. I'm going back to index. Sorry about that. All right, basically the same as I did up here, right here. So let's build this. Again, every time, just be aware, every time you build, you're basically regenerating all your contacts because you're getting that from the database. But, starting from home, contact, I'll go to the end page, create new, A, B, D, right? This should take me to the B page, which it does, right? I could go and delete. Now the only thing that's left to do is to do an edit. And the edit is a pretty simple thing to do. We can have a edit method. And again, here again, there's just a little bit more work. It's actually just even though we don't have a database, there's a little bit more work because you want to make sure you're deleting from the collection. We're going to run into something similar when we work with databases because we're going to work with a data context, and we'll have a contact object, and we're going to have to make sure that that contact object is from the particular data context that we're working with. That might sound a little bit more complicated than it is. So now when we click on, I'm going to set this up to do edit. Okay, so copy and paste it a little bit. I'm going to send in a contact. I'm going to get the contact, make sure it's the one that I'm looking for. And we did this in class too. And so basically, once I end up getting that from the collection, that collection is in cache. I can change its values, and I can change its values. In essence, that's what's going to end up editing it. And we'll see that in a second. If I go back to my contact controller, my edit and my create are going to be almost identical. In fact, I'm going to cheat a little bit by copying these two things. And this is very common. The one thing that we're not doing, that we will do next time, is we're going to do some validation. We're going to make sure that the user gives us a first name and a last name and an email address that is an email address, and make sure that we don't get a duplicate email address. So this is going to be edit, okay, and this is going to be passed in an ID. And this is going to be edit, right? And this is going to be passed in ID. It's important here, I can't do the model binding here. And the reason I can't do the model binding, even though this is an ID and I can say that this is the contact, I can't do it because it's going to say, hey, look, you have two methods with the same signature, okay? So the get and the post, they basically make it easy for the routing mechanism to choose the right action to go to. But, this thing still has to compile, so the signatures have to be different. So real simply, I'm going to say contact equals contact BUS, get contact ID, right, and that's what's going to get returned to the view. I mean, this is almost identical to the details. And here, I'm not going to create. I'm going to edit. Again, I'm not going to do any of my validation. My validation would have gone here. You could save this and you could build it. If you went to run it, you can end up getting an error because we don't have an edit method, right? I'm still going to run into. It's going to be a little bit different here, right? Where I get this situation. So what I'm going to do here is right-click, add view. This is going to be edit. I don't need the libraries, okay? And this is going to be an edit view. And it does the same thing as the create. The only difference is that it needs to have the model ID, so it puts it in there. And again, it's going to use model binding. When the form goes back, the properties of the form are going to specify what the model is. So I can build this, and our editing should work at this point. And if I was to go back here and change the last name to, Cats, and click on save, it's going to take me to the K, and there I am, right? Again, I'm not doing any validation on the email address, but this should take me to the S, where I should see this user on here, and they're over here. Again, I can delete them. I could go to the details. So, I took advantage of the scaffolding that gets created, but don't get intimidated by it. I mean, there's not that much really that's going on. If you wanted to, you don't necessarily need these labels. You could just do an input. I mean, you could do something as simple as, this is what it's gonna. You could say input name equals first name, value equals model dot first name. Right? I mean, if I ran this now, I'm going to see two text boxes on this page, right? What am I on? My edit, right? So, I mean, that's all that it's really outputting. So, again, don't get intimidated by these HTML helpers. In fact, we're going to end up creating one of our own, not the next class, but the one after that. So, the next one that I'm going to do is I'm going to do one for. I want to do validation. I'm going to do that pretty quickly, and then again, I realize it's taking a little while. I'm going to get into doing some jQuery things like getting our on our list, instead of getting the full page, we'll get just the contacts that ended up changing and that sort of thing. Okay, so that's going to do it for this one, and I'll see you later.